Materiactors went from having literally 1 or 2 cards in the game that were just entirely mismatched to the rest of the game, to now having what feels like an actual competent deck, even if it is a little on the small side. So this is the Materiactor deck we played on stream quite a while back. Admittedly, I haven't been posting videos an awful lot. I would explain why, but I'll bore you. But effectively, this is, I think, the best way of playing the deck if you wanted to play a primarily Materiactor deck. What effectively does the deck do? Well, you want to turbo out its rank 3 boss monster. Doesn't that sound familiar? So there's a couple of really good cards within the deck, especially, you know, the Zeptawing and the Gigadra. There's a really powerful foundation here. We are missing a little bit, I think, to sort of tie it all together and to add a little bit of diversity to the deck strategy, which is why we're using a little bit of support in the form of, you know, the Terror Top line, the Fiendsmith cards, the Bystials. Basically just ways of putting extra power, extra gas, and taking advantage of some of the things that the deck does really well. And that is effectively drawing cards, but not in the way in which you would typically expect. The way this deck typically works is your Exegard is going to be attaching materials to itself via its own effect and via the effects of other supporting cards from the top of your deck to itself. And then through various effects of your Materiactor cards, you're going to return materials from your Materiactor Exceed monsters to your hand, which means that you're going to be trying to equip cards off the top of your deck, such as Fiendsmith Engraver, Duel Knockbird, Nibiru, whatever, in order to add those cards to your hand to use them against your opponent. So that is the general idea. I'd say to that, it's just a general sort of combo-y style deck that takes advantage of the Fiendsmith cards because it's really easy to put up a couple of bodies, and why wouldn't you? So I've got a couple of replays I want to show off with the deck, one or two showing off what the Materiactor cards specifically do, because when they pop off, they're actually really cool. I actually really like how it works. The gimmick is really interesting. It definitely needs fleshed out, but when it works, it is pretty cool. And there's not a lot of bad cards in the deck either, which I think is fairly impressive. Like, the deck is concise enough to where most of the cards that you're playing almost always do something, which is a nice feeling to the deck. So I definitely see a little bit more support making this into its own deck. I think would really make this shine. It's got a really strong foundation, and I hope they continue to build upon it. So I've got a couple of replays of the Materiactor cards specifically in action, and then a couple more of just the deck in general, just taking advantage of all of the resources made available to it. And then I'll go through the deck card for card at the end of the video and talk a little bit more about particular interactions. So if you're interested in catching more videos as they come out, we're going back to a much simpler style of video creation. I think I was putting too much on my own plate when it came to all of the editing and the animating and stuff, which I love to do, but I don't get enough out of this channel to justify the crazy amount of time it takes. So I am going to be taking a wee step back to maybe just realign ourselves and get videos out a little bit more often. So hopefully you want to catch them. Anyways, like and subscribe. I'll not bore you at the beginning. Let's get into those replays. Alright, getting in the replay number 1, and I do believe this is the one that showed off the Materiactor cards a good bit. We're going to start off with our Exoraptor, and we're going to go Zeptawing here. Zeptawing is basically a really nice extender. It just special summons and it searches on summon, which is why we're playing that card at 3. It's really good. And this deck does not mess around. It doesn't go for anything super fancy. It's straight into the boss monster. We're going straight into Exegard, detaching the material to grab us the trap card, which is really good. Then we're going to go for the continuous spell, which we did manage to pull a royal of, which was really nice. It checks the top 6 cards of the deck. We grab a Materiactor card among them, and we add it to our hand. And then we put the other cards back in any order we want, which you'll see here is very important because we draw off the top of the deck, and then we can stack cards onto our monsters from the top of the deck. So choosing which ones are on there is very important because now we get access to the full Fiendsmith combo using Track. So Track, of course, grabs Lurie, drops Lurie, summons Lurie into Requiem. We all know this line very well by now. We're going to go Requiem, summon the Lacrima. Lacrima then sending the Engraver to the graveyard. Engraver can activate Engrave, returning the Lurie, summoning itself out to the field. And again, this is just effectively the Materiactor cards helping to enable the Fiendsmith engine, which is just a really powerful thing to do. The deck doesn't have enough of its own sort of dedicated on-theme boss monsters or endboard pieces yet. So setting up what you can with the deck in the form of Exegard and Critical and stuff, and then using the remaining gas and resources in order to go into a Fiendsmith-esque board is really, I think, the best way of playing it right now. So we're going to go over all of that. That's fine. We're going to activate another copy of Materiactor Meltdown here, because the way this card works is basically anytime an Exceed monster activates its effect, say for example the not once per turn or once per chain DDD Wave High King Caesar, or in fact the Exegard, we get to take the card off the top of our deck and attach it to our Materiactor Exegard. And that is, it is once per turn, but it's a soft once per turn. So with 2 copies in the field, we get to grab 2 cards off the top of the deck and equip them onto Exegard, so that we can then bounce them from the Exegard back to our hand, right? So effectively, that's the idea. They're going to start with Gold Sark banishing the Mercurier. Oh, I remember this match. It was pretty good. They're going to go Mercurier grabbing Guiding Quem from deck to hand. Now they're going to go, or sorry, we're going to hit with a Duel, obviously. Duel is busted. Guiding Quem, normal summon, sending Albaz to the graveyard, activating the Blazing Cartesia in the hand here. Summoning it out to the field. He's going to activate the Branded in White. We're going to negate that because Branded in White's a pretty powerful card. So we don't want that to happen. He's going to chain the Cartesia. And again, we're going to negate. I don't want to use both my negates in a singular chain, but if we can prevent him from going into any of his fusions, then he's not going to be able to use Quem, which is going to generally help us quite a lot here. So negating 2 forms of fusion summon is going to be huge. Going from Materiactor Meltdown, we activate both of them here. That's going to let us grab 2 cards off the top of our deck. We're going to shuffle back our Engraver to deal an additional 1200 points of damage to our opponent. That burn definitely adds up. So Materiactor Meltdown going to equip onto our fella. What do we grab? We fished out a Terratop and a Fiendsmith Tract. These are crazy cards to be adding to your hand on the clapback. Brand of Fusion then being activated. We got the Materiactor critical here, which is an omni-negate. Activating the critical, we're going to return a card back to our hand from the Exegard. And effectively, depending on the type of card you return, you get a bonus effect. If you return a monster, you have to return a card from your hand back to your deck, so that's actually a negative effect. But if you return a spell card, you boost your monster up permanently. And if you have a trap card, you can set the card that you added. So if you have a trap, you immediately set it back onto the field. Pretty solid stuff. A way of taking advantage of all the various resources you can grab off of the Meltdown and the Exegard. So it is cool. When it all works out, it's pretty dope. We're going to go for the Materiactor Meltdown here again, checking the top 6 once per turn. Again, grabbing an extra card from our deck, stacking the top of our deck however we want. It is a really good effect in the grind game, especially considering I can grab cards back from our monsters on the field. We're going to summon out the Gigadra from the deck. That's going to trigger off both of our Meltdowns because we use the Exegard's effect. So we're going to grab a Engraver and a Nobleman of Crossout, or sorry, Crossout Designator. Play too much old Yu-Gi-Oh! Nowadays. So we're going to grab the Meltdown off another Zepta Wing, bring it back a normal monster from the graveyard. We now have 3 copies of Meltdown. Now we're going to go into the big OTK play, and that's going to take the form of the Ashura King. The Ashura King is not a huge monster in terms of outward attack points, but it does have a built-in monster to get, which is very, very useful. But it can also attack a number of times up to the materials that it has, and it gains 200 extra attack points for every attack that it makes. So while 2100 isn't exactly terrifying, being hit with 21, 23, 25, then 27 if we were to have all of our materials is pretty devastating. So the Ashura King, if you can clear the board using your other resources, equipping 3 cards onto our Exegard is crazy. There's an Ash and stuff we could grab back to our hand here. It's so cool when it works, man. I fucking love it. We're going to go into the battle phase, 3k, 28, and we have 3 attacks on our Ashura King. So we are absolutely going for lethal. So that was solid. Again, it shows off the deck doing what it wants to do. But you can see what I mean when I say that, like, once we summon the Exegard, that's kind of all the Materiactor cards do, right? Which is good, don't get me wrong, but it's one thing, right? Which is not very difficult to stop, unfortunately. So that's what I'm saying when I think the deck needs the Fiendsmith cards, not because its engine is way stronger than its inboard, right? The Materiactor engine cards are actually pretty good. They're really solid, and there's a lot of them that are good, but it doesn't have anything to end on. It just has like one boss monster. And so anyways, let's get into a few more replays, and hopefully you'll sort of see what I mean. All right, getting into our next replay, going second this time, which the deck, of course, isn't fantastic with, but it actually does surprisingly have a number of tools that help it, between just having pretty solid gas, being a deck that likes to play a ton of non-engine, which does often mean you can interrupt an opponent's end board. Like our opponent here playing Centurion. By the way, if you're ever struggling with like Centurion and you don't know where to stop them, they do have a pretty important choke point, so they're going to go through all their shenanigans, all this shit. Gargoyle, Prima, Primaris. I'm going to speed this up a little bit because we've seen Centurion, and if you haven't seen Centurion, check out our previous videos to get a little bit more info. But the deck really isn't all that complicated. He's going to go through all this crazy stuff, drawing cards into Auxilia. This is it. If you can negate Auxilia, in pure Centurion, 99% of the time, that's going to end their turn. And the key reason that's going to end their turn is because they effectively need to recycle one of their tuners during their end phase. If their Auxilia is negated, they cannot reset the Atri or the Primera, which means if they've already burned their gas and they don't have another way of setting up an Atri or a Primera from the graveyard, they're kind of cooked. So, yeah, pretty good for us. We're going to normal summon the Zeptawing, which, of course, isn't what you want to do most of the time, but sometimes you gotta. We're going to get Ashed on the Zeptawing, which is totally fine, because we weren't really planning on doing very much with the Materiactor cards here. We're going to go into the tract, and this is going to effectively be another showcase of why the Fiendsmith cards are so important. They're going to hit us with the Duel here, which, unironically, into both Fiendsmith and Materiactor. Doesn't really matter. It's nice with the Exegar to be able to add a card to hand sometimes, but Exegar can also just special summon monsters directly from the deck, which means the Duel really doesn't hurt this deck that badly, depending on sort of what the trigger was for it. So we're going to drop that Auxilia. That's going to trigger the Primus to come back, which was actually an oversight on my part. The Primus coming back is actually kind of a big deal because it's a tuner. We do have an out to the Trudea in the form of the Heretic Seal, though. The Heretic Seal is a big thing for this deck. Heretic Seal is such an underrated card. It's so good. Just non-targeting quick play removal is great. Now, of course, this is only during the opponent's turn, but that's totally fine. They're going to go for the Trudea here. That's okay. We've already cooked them by going for the timing on the Drissworm. The goal was not the Heretic Seal itself. The goal was effectively sending the Drissworm to the graveyard on the chain immediately prior to Trudea. So as long as he didn't chain Trudea or summon Trudea before we went in the Heretic Seal, we were fine. And even if he did, it would have burnt his interruption on the Drissworm, because the only target for... he only really would have been able to go into Legacia. Legacia pops the monster in the field with the highest attack points, which would have been the Drissworm, which meant no matter what play our opponent made there, they were cooked. That's why we did things the way we did. Just going into the Heretic Seal is just a little bit of gravy on top of that. We got the Lacrima then. Lacrima that's going to activate its effect, bring it back the Engraver. We know the Fiendsmith plays by now. I'm not going to sit and linger on them too much. We're going to go into Caesar. Then Battle Phase, taking out the Trudea. And when it comes to this particular deck, Centurion really... they've got a lot of one-card combos and such, but a lot of their combos are very costly and require quite a lot. So they are going to imperm our wave, which is a huge deal. But as long as we just pitch that Trudea back to his hand, unless he's got exactly like Emblema Oath in his hand, can't really do anything, right? So he has to have exactly Emblema Oath or like Stand-Up Centurion, like a second copy of the field spell. We know he's used one copy of each, so it's not very likely he's going to have a second copy of either. Bring it back to Magnanimate then. Summon a Magnanimate from the deck off the seals, so that means that during the end phase, Lacrima is going to trigger, Magnanimate's going to trigger, Magnanimate being able to search for us for any dragon from our deck, including any of the Materiactor cards, means that going into the next turn, we have a shitload of follow-up. It's just good stuff. So again, a little bit of a more complex sort of back and forth showing of the deck. Not a ton going on because Centurion, luckily for us, has some very clear exploitable weaknesses, and I suppose maybe that's just a little bit of matchup knowledge, but I guess that's also very important when you're playing any deck that wants to be an engine and wants to focus on non-engine. You need to sort of have a level of knowledge about some of, or at least most of, your matchups so that you can make those informed decisions. But anyways, I'm not going to linger on too much. Next game. All right, and one more. I want to show off a little bit more about some of the other interactions. We are going second here. We try to hit him with Fawalos and we get negated. We do like playing Fawalos in this deck because, as you saw from the previous replay, the Materiactor cards themselves very rarely play through one, even two interruptions at the best of times. Now, again, the deck is built using that knowledge and bearing that in mind, so it's not as if that's some sort of new information or like a mystery problem. We know that that's the case, which is why we're playing the Terratop cards, which is why we're playing the Fiendsmith cards and the Bystials. And likely, if you're going to continue to implement this in more competitive fashions, you would reduce Materiactor and increase other supporting engines in order to take advantage, or not take advantage, patch up the fact that they can't really play through a singular interruption using their own engine. So yeah, effectively, I had a whole bunch of replays, but most of the time it was just use Materiactor card, eat negate, play Fiendsmith. So we're not going to do that. This last replay here is just going to be to show off a couple of the other interactions. Our opponent's playing the Fiendsmith Primate Control deck, which I saw a little bit of in the World Qualifier, and I see in Ranked sometimes, but it's pretty good. I know it was on the tier list for a bit there. I'm a little out of the loop when it comes to super competitive Master Duel. Not to say we're not like Master Rank and shit, but that's easy. Sequence then from the graveyard, going to summon out the Duston, just so they got the Dippity, not the Duston. Same difference, doesn't really matter. We're going to draw into the Prima Materiactor, which is kind of somewhat maybe useful. They're going to go for Max C. Max C, unfortunately, is a pretty huge problem because we don't have the engine to play through Max C. We're going to summon out the Takatomborg. We're going to go Meltdown. Meltdown gets ashed. And without having a Materiactor card on board, we're going to need to start playing the game. Now, you've got a couple of options here. You can go for Moon. Moon is admittedly, the bitch me in play. And I will say that myself. If you wanted to be a little ballsy here, you absolutely could have gone for this. Exegard probably would have been cool because we already had the Zeptowing and stuff in hand. So you've really got an option there. And that's kind of what makes the Terratop so good. Terratop can either go into a pre-combo Gossip Shadow. It can go into Moon if you've already got the gas you need from the Materiactor. It can go into the Exegard if you needed to. So Terratop is a fantastic enabler for this deck. They're going to go for the Magnamut here on the Engraver. Yeah, we're in their maxi. We're not winning that. So again, that's unfortunate. But I wanted to show that a little bit, that the deck is not ultimately all that resilient, and it is very dependent upon a lot of sort of moving pieces. It can't go second very well. And I don't want you to look at this, and I appreciate some people are probably listening to me say this and watching that gameplay, and they're like, what deck is going to be able to play under fucking Caesar, that fusion... Caesar, Desiree, Maxi, Magnamut. Like, yeah, that's a lot to play through for any deck, and I totally get that. But this is just one of the better replays I found to show it off. But anyways, I'm not going to ramble. I'm going to bring up the deck list here. We're going to go through the deck card for card, and I'm going to try to put my vision out here because I have super high hopes for this deck, and I know that there's going to be good ways of playing it. So hopefully you bear with me. I do usually like to have sort of maybe 4 replays, or I like to show off a little bit more about the deck in the gameplay segment of the video. However, the reason we only showed off the 3 replays, and the reason they were all rather basic, other than the first one, which was really good, is the very reason that we're talking about this deck to begin with. This deck has a lot of potential. Some of the cards are really fucking good. Gigadra, being able to discard a card to special summon a level 3 normal from hand or deck, or if you discard a normal monster, special summoning any Materiactor, this card's really good. Instant rank 3. We've got Zeptowing, which is an extender and a searcher. Broken card. We've got Exoraptor, which is an extender that searches. Really good. Like, this card has a couple of engine cards that are fantastic. And the way that things like Materiactor Meltdown integrate into the deck and interact with the deck and its design strategy is really impressive. It's very well designed, right? And I love that. I love that it's a deck that knows what it wants to do and does what it wants to do pretty well. The only thing is with the deck is that while the tools it has are great, it just doesn't have enough of them. And it doesn't even have enough things to build into. There is technically 2 Materiactor Exceed monsters. This one's garbage. What is it? Attach Materiactor monster from deck. That's garbage. We don't want to be attaching Materiactor monsters from deck onto our Exceed monsters. The whole point of the gimmick is that we attach non-Materiactor cards to take advantage of them. That's the whole point of the deck, and that's why a pure Materiactor deck is a bad idea. And it's a bad idea because playing Materiactors is not what Materiactors wants to do. Unless you're going to be playing a 15 card engine and 25 hand traps, this deck doesn't want to be pure. So effectively, the way in which I see this deck being best utilized is going to be in rank 3 Pels, for sure. And you can say that that's the same for, you know, Scarclaw and Goblins and Phantom Knights and blah, blah, blah. A lot of those other decks also function really well independently, like Scarclaw, as we've seen from video after video, stream after stream, meta after meta. Scarclaw is forever one of those decks that will just pop up out of nowhere, rock your shit, and then run, right? It's a really good deck, and it works pure. Phantom Knights, beautiful deck, works fantastically pure. Goblins are broken. I can't believe I haven't made a video on the new Goblin cards yet. What am I doing with my life? But anyway, they're broken. They're good, right? You can play Goblins. Can't really play Materiactors. Not because there's not enough support, but because even if there were more cards, it doesn't accomplish the goal of what the deck wants to do. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that then going forward, when it comes to this deck, that's the angle that they continue to build on. I hope that they don't go in the direction of the Gigaboros, and that's like attaching Materiactor cards to your things as material. I want more cards like Meltdown. I think Meltdown sums this deck up really well, where you're attaching random cards off the top of your deck to your Materiactors, and then you're able to recycle those back using however many different effects you've got between the X-Raptor and the traps and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I hope that's the direction the deck keeps going in, and that's the direction that very much designed this build of the deck. So let's go through it. Kept you in suspense long enough. You've already seen all the cards anyway, but whatever. Let's get into it. So we got 2 copies of the Prima Materiactor. You can technically use any level 3 normal dragon. I know a lot of people like to play, you know, funny cards like Baby Dragon and stuff. By all means, this guy being a light is sometimes useful. It's mainly here for his Pendulum effect, which just can equip himself in the Pendulum Zone onto one of your Materiactor Exceed monsters, which isn't a massively useful effect. But especially with Exiguard, there are some interactions. This guy gets bonus effects if the card you return... Sorry, he gets bonus effects if you have a normal monster in graveyard, and he needs to be able to detach cards more often. So it's nice to have a monster that can equip itself onto your Exceed monster in a pinch, just in case you really need to do that. Because the engine for self-sustaining Exceed materials with the Materiactor Meltdown and such is really, really powerful. But if you blow your load too early, let's say you start detaching cards like crazy off the X-Raptor or off the trap card, and you forget to keep yourself stocked up, sometimes you need a little bit of a boost to get the reactor going again, right? So the Prima Materiactor, I think, is really good for that specific purpose, in case you've exhausted all the materials off the Exiguard and you really just need a little bit of a push. So, and 2 copies is just for the Gigadrus. You can play it at 1 if you want, but the Gigadrus being able to special summon a level 3 specifically from hand or deck means that it's often nice to have a second one to go into in the following turn. So that's why we're playing 2. We've got sticking to Materiactor cards for now. We're going to play 3 copies of Gigadrus. Again, special summons a monster from deck. It's pretty fucking dope. The Exiraptor can special summon itself from hand by discarding a card. And you can add a level 3 normal monster from deck or graveyard to your hand again, which is pretty good. So he's an extender and a searcher / recycler. So Exiraptor's low-key one of the better cards in the deck, to be honest. It's really good. Zeptowing. Zeptowing, I think, is probably the best of the monsters. So this guy, if you control a Materiactor card, bear in mind it says card, including things like Meltdown, you can special summon this card from your hand. If it's summoned, you get to add a Materiactor card from deck to hand. Then you can add to your hand or special summon a level 3 normal monster from your graveyard. So having normal monsters in grave is useful because it takes full advantage of all of these guys' effects. So that's why we're playing the double normal, but that's effectively the Exiraptor monsters we're playing. Or sorry, the Materiactor monsters we're playing. We are playing 3 copies of the spell. Its search effect is a hard once per turn, like to check in the top 6 cards of the deck and stacking them in any order. But its second effect, to steal materials off the top of the deck, is a soft once per turn, meaning you want 3 of these cards active to just be piling those materials onto your Exceed monsters. And then we got the One of Trap card, which is an Omni Negate that gives you a bonus effect by adding adding a card, one of your Exceed materials, back to your hand, and you gain a bonus effect based upon the material. So it's an Omni Negate plus, which is just good, man. That's what I'm saying. All of these cards, really good. It's hard to look at any of them and think that that's a bad card. Prima, of course, it's a normal monster. It's the 1 brick. But I think every other card in this deck is really solid in terms of the actual Materiactor cards. Then we got the Terratop engine, 3 Terratop, 1 Takutomborg. The utility with that engine is crazy. Gossip Shadow is one of my favorite things to do. Again, you have to go into every game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Expecting to get hit with something. You cannot go into a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And be surprised when your opponent activates a hand trap, right? So Terratop is really good because not only is it a way to get instantly into your Materiactor combo, it also is fantastic bait for stopping your opponent from doing anything. It is also played in a plethora of decks, which means it doesn't give your opponent any major information right off the bat. It of course narrows down the pool of what decks you could be playing, but there's a lot of any sort of rank 3 spam deck loves Terratop. So they could think you're playing Punk, they could think you're playing Scarclaw, they could think you're playing Goblins, like anything that likes 3s likes Terratop. So it's a way to put up to bait out interaction or to set up protection from interaction without giving your opponent a massive amount of information. Or in a pinch, it can go into either your Materiactor full combo, or if you've got another way of doing Materiactor full combo in hand, like a Gigadrus, or maybe you've got Meltdown and Zeptowing, or whatever the situation may be, then it can also do the Fiendsmith line to help you either A, bolster your board against interruption, or bait out interruption, or give you a recovery play for if you want to use Materiactor as bait instead. It just gives you a lot of options. So Terratop, I think, is great. Then we got the Fiendsmith cards, of course. The 1 Lurie, the double Engraver, 1 Lacrima, triple Tract. Just standard stuff. We're not really playing anything super fancy on that front. We're not playing Paradise or anything. Just enough cards where we're maximizing on starters that helps us play for interruption and gives us a nice little addition to our end board. And from there, it's pretty much hand traps. So again, in keeping with our Punk video, we are sticking to high impact hand traps, and it has been treating us beautifully. We got the triple Droll, triple Nib has been fantastic. We got 1 Veiler, triple Ash. We got the triple Fawalos because the deck does admittedly struggle a little bit going second, and the deck also has a ton of cards that want you to discard shit. So having Fawalos in your hand, not the end of the world if you are going first. We've got, the cross out, the call by, just all the standard shenanigans when it comes to hand traps. If you want to bring down, there is definitely a world where, because you're grabbing so many cards off the top of your deck, when your deck works, you're grabbing a lot of shit off the top of your deck. So there's definitely a world where you want to reduce Droll and Nib in order to increase the variety of cards you could use against your opponent. Maybe throw in a Ghost Ogre, maybe a Bell. Bell's pretty lackluster right now. Maybe Ogre. Definitely a world where you could do that. Throw in some Imperm, throw in some Confetti. I don't really care. I'm sticking to triple Droll, triple Nib because these cards win you games, and a lot of the other cards right now, unfortunately, do not. But take that as you will. So yeah, effectively just a whole shitload of hand traps. And we've also got the 1 Magnemite and the 1 Drissworm. While these are good cards to just have in hand and good hand traps, the main reason that they are here is this fella. All of your Materiactor cards are dragons, and because it is so easy for you to spam multiple of them onto the board, you will often have the ability to either, as an additional option, as a sidewise line, or just as a play you have, is Seals. Seals then, during your opponent's turn, of course, bounces a card back to hand by tributing itself, and once it tributes itself, it summons a dragon from the deck. Magnemite is a fantastic target for this card because Magnemite will grab you another dragon at the end of that turn. If you already have gas in your hand, you can go for the likes of a Drissworm, which is again another fantastic card to have in your hand, or indeed you could go for any of your Materiactor monsters because they're all dragons. It guarantees follow-up or additional interruption while being interruption. What's not to love? And that's pretty much the whole main deck. And it's really, really straightforward. Just all of the good Materiactor cards, all of the good Fiendsmith cards, a whole shitload of fucking hand traps, and then some Bestials. Straightforward. Into the extra deck. So the extra deck is definitely where you've got a little bit of room to play around with. In terms of fusions, we got the Lacrima, Necroquip Princess, and the Desiree, of course, for our Fiendsmith lane, paired with the Requiem and the Moon and the Sequence, just sort of like the minimum cards that you need. Necroquip is a card that's been growing on me a lot. I didn't use it too much when I was playing this deck, but in another video I've got coming out soon on Fiendsmith Evil Heroes, Necroquip is goated. Such a good card. And I definitely was underutilizing this card when I was playing this deck on stream, because I didn't fully understand how it works, but now I get it. This card's so good, man. Yeah, so that's our basic sort of Fiendsmith package for the extra. We got Gossip Shadow, of course, because we're spamming threes like no one's business. Ashura King is goated for our OTK plays. Can attack a number of times each battle phase, up to the number of materials, including direct attacks, and every time it attacks, it gains 200 attack points. It also has a monster to get built in, so like everything about this card is incredible. While it's not got a ton of attack points, it's not going to be breaking boards, and the deck is already kind of pretty good at doing that. So usually breaking a board isn't too much of a problem, and the Ashura King just guarantees that once the board is dealt with, you've got a straight path to lethal. Double Exegard, I don't think I ever summoned a second one, but 2 makes me feel better, so I'm playing 2. Downard plus Zeus, because we're playing Exceed decks, and Zeus is amazing, so why not? Especially if you're using the Materiactor Meltdown to build up your Exegard to criminal proportions in terms of the number of Exceed materials. Having a Zeus that has like 8, 10, 12 materials is definitely possible, and it definitely sounds like a good time. Didn't happen personally, but I see a world where it happens, and I'm glad we don't live in that timeline. But anyways, we got the Caesar as well for the Fiendsmith cards I didn't mention. Heraldic Seal I already talked about. SP doesn't need any introduction, and we're right back around the Fiendsmith. The deck really isn't all that complicated. It is a blast, it is a lot of fun, and I'm definitely wanting to test it out in more sort of rank 3 spam-ish pale decks. I think that's likely going to be the direction that Materiactor takes, not because I think the deck is too weak to function on its own. I think the deck is not designed to function on its own through the very function of the cards and the way they're worded and the way they work. It's going to be most effective to mix this deck with other decks, just because of how it works. And I really hope they continue that trend when they inevitably release more support for this. I hope that the support helps it bleed into and leech off of other archetypes with similar playstyles to its own. And I hope they don't. This is one of the few decks that I hope they don't make xenophobic. I hope they really kind of keep this. It's semi-xenophobic enough already where it like locks you into Exceeds and stuff. I can live with that though, because it means it's locked into things with a fairly similar playstyle to itself, which I'm okay with. But I hope they don't go down the route of trying to make Materiactor like a standalone Titan, because it is not going to work. I've rambled enough. Again, I just wanted to make sure that my thoughts on the deck were clear. I love talking about this deck. I love thinking about this. It's a lot of fun. I do like it a lot, and I would recommend trying it out if you've got the cards. It is super duper cheap. It is literally just, I guess the meltdowns do kind of suck. It sucks that meltdown is a UR. Maybe it's not cheap. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I'm lying out of my fucking teeth. But anyways, if you've got the cards, test it out. Worst case scenario, you don't like it. If you don't have the cards, it is not a deck I would rush to craft. It's not going to be anything, you know, super duper competitive. But if you have the hankering to try it, it is definitely not going to be a waste of your time. So, thanks for listening to me ramble. If you got this far into the video, I dare say most of you have already clicked off by now. But if you did get here, help your brother out. I'll go ahead and subscribe and like the video. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.